Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun.
Mantra Guru a Jotto Shikha Gurugon Tar Chorane Age Korya Bandhan Bande Aham Shri Guru Shri Jataparaгаmanam Shri Guru Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Shagarajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Shajivam Sadhairam Savadudam Parijana Shaitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shivishakam Vitamscha Mancha kalpaturubhyascha kripasindubheva chapatitanam pavanebho vaishnavebho namo namaha Oma jnana timirandasya jnananchana shalakaya chukshushanmalitam jnana tasma shri gurave namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swamiyati Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shandavari Paschata Desha Tarine. In our previous lesson, lesson 9, we were discussing chapters 15 and 16 of the Nectar Devotion. We presented an overview of the process of Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. We described the position of the Ragatmikas, the eternal associates of the Lord, perfected beings, devotees, perfected, exemplifying the various Roshas in Bhakti Rosh, in the Vatsalya, Mudurja, Shakya, Dasha, Rosh, and the Ragatmika Bhaktas are exemplified. And in Vrindavan, we can see their devotional sentiment and hear about it. And Raganuga is the practice of cultivating a sentiment similar. And when we hear actually the example of the Goswamis themselves, that Gopi Bhava, Rashamritadbi, Laharira Kulurada Magnura Mahur, Bande Rupa Shanatano, Raghu Yago, Shijiva Gopalako, that the Gopi Bhav, Rashamritadbi, Rasha Amrit, the flavors, the nectarian flavors are Abdi, Rashamrit Abdi, of the ocean of the gopis' flavor of loving Krishna. Kalula Magno, Kalula, the waves in that ocean, Magno, entering within, Mahur again and again. The Goswamis of Vrindavan were merging again and again, diving again deeply into the ocean of rasa, of nectarian mallows, of the flavor of the gopis' love for Krishna. Radha Krishna Gunashmitir Moduri Anandena Shamohito, remembering the qualities of Radha and Krishna. So in this way, the Goswamis were practicing Ragmag Bhakti in the Madhurja Rosh in Vrindavan, and similarly, the followers of Rupa Goswami also will similarly develop a similar sentiment of loving Krishna, following the example of the Goswamis of Vrindavan. The Rupanugas generally are in the Madhurja Bhav. And we were discussing the relevance of the practice of Ragamag Bhakti for ISKCON, and Prabhupada was mentioning this is the goal, this is Parabhakti, and that when one is completely liberated from material attachment, material pollution, then one is eligible to cultivate these sentiments, having realized his eternal relationship with Krishna in Vrindavan, and identified with the particular Ragatmika Bhakta, and serving Krishna according to their sentiment, and externally demonstrating the same standard behaviors of the Vaidhi Sadhaka. In this lesson, we'll be discussing chapters 17 to 19. That's Bhava and Prema Bhakti, ecstatic love of Godhead and love of God. Prabhupada defines Bhav Bhakti in his opening paragraph to the chapter 17, ecstatic love, And when we read such a definition, we can only conclude that such a definition could only be written by a person who themselves is a Bhav Bhakta. Let's read Prabhupada's definition. By the process of executing regulative devotional service, one is actually elevated onto the transcendental stage, beyond the modes of nature. At that time, one's heart becomes illuminated like the sun. The sun is far above the planetary systems, and there is no possibility of its being covered by any kind of cloud. Similarly, when a devotee is purified like the sun, from his pure heart there is diffusion of ecstatic love, which is more glorious than the sunshine. Prabhupada continues, he's summarizing Rupa Goswami's verses. To clarify, in the previous chapters, the symptoms of devotional service were explained, along with instruction. The symptoms were the definition of pure devotional service, anyabhilashita shunya, jnana karmadi anamritam, anukulena krishnanu shilanam bhaktir uttam bhakti, shuddha bhakti, ananda bhakti, pure devotional service. So the symptoms, that definition and the characteristics and the respective stages at which they develop were all explained, along with instructions as how we may execute devotional service with our present senses. And that was chapters 2 to 14, which were describing Vaidhi and Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, wherein one's mind, one's senses smelling the flower garlands and hearing the Krishna Katamrit, and with the legs walking to the temple, with the eyes seeing the deity of the Lord, with the tongue tasting the Mahaprasad Bhojan, etc., circumambulating the temple. So in this way, with our present senses, and by practicing in this way, we gradually rise to the platform of ecstasy in spontaneous love. And this is the goal of sadhana bhakti, awakening real affection for Sri Hari, which is dormant in the heart, which has become covered over as a result of our materialistic consciousness. As Mahaprabhu explained to Srila Ishwar Puri after receiving the Harinam initiation and the Vaishnav Diksha mantra, Kiva mantra dilo goshai, kivatar bol, jopati mantra korile pago. What kind of mantra have you given me, Goshai? What's its strength? Jopati mantra. By chanting that mantra, Karele Pagal, I become crazy. And hearing this, Srila Ishwar Puri Prabhupada was very pleased. Bhalo, hoilo, paele, tumi param purushartha. It's very wonderful, my child, that you have attained this ultimate goal of life. Tomar preme ete yami ho ilan kritato. And I'm obligated now. Ami kritato toma premete, seeing the development of love of Godhead that you have achieved. And then Ishwar Puri responded to the inquiry of Gaudhari. Kiba mantra dilo Goshai, kibatar bol. What mantra have you given me, Goshai? What is its strength? Ishwar Puri Prabhupada, he replied that Hari Krishna Mahamantra Jai to Shabhav Jai Jape Tari Krishna Upajai Bhav. The Hare Krishna Mahamantra, Jaito Shabhav, the very nature of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Jai Jape, whoever chants, Tare Krishna Upajai Bhav. For them, Tare Krishna, unto Krishna, Upajai, there is an awakening of Bhav, feelings. So this is the very nature of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Especially chanting Hare Krishna, following the rules and the regulations, the practices recommended by Sri Rupa Goswami, the Vaidhi sadhana practices. So chanting Hare Krishna along with the Vaidhi sadhana practices, that Jai Jape, whoever chants, whoever practices these sadhana methods, Jai Jape, Tare Krishna Upajai Bhav, there will be, if we're practicing properly. These, just like the analogies that Srila Prabhupada discussed in chapters 2 and 3, just like the physician gives a certain prescription which will cure the patient. So if we practice the sadhana activities, just as Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada are prescribing, then in due course of time, if we continue to practice with patience, in due course of time there will be the gradual awakening of Jai Jape Tare Krishna Upajai Bhav. Bhav Bhakti, feelings of love of Godhead. The verse, let's read from these slides, the verse that Srila Prabhupada is examining here, written by Srila Rupa Goswami, chapter 3, Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, text number 1. Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma Prema Shudangshu Shamya Bhak Ruchibish Chitta Marshniya Kridasho Bhava Uchite. When devotional service is executed on the transcendental platform of pure goodness, it is like a sun ray for love of Krishna. At such a time, devotional service causes the heart to be softened by various tastes, and one is situated in bhava, emotion. You can see Prabhupada's opening paragraph, how he's reflecting the different elements of this verse by Srila Rupa. Prema Shudangshu, that just like a sun ray of love for Krishna. And Prabhupada explained that the sun, from his pure, just like the sun, from the pure heart, there is diffusion of ecstatic love, which is more glorious than the sunshine. Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma, the Lord's internal potency, Samvit Ladini, descends into the heart of the devotee. Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma. This attachment is very confidentially kept by Krishna and is bestowed only upon pure devotees. Even ordinary devotees cannot have such pure attachment for Krishna. Prema Shud Angshu Shamyabhak. It's the onset of prema. Just like a ray of sun is similar to the onset of the sunrise. In this connection, there's a statement in the Tantras that ecstasy is the first symptom of pure love for the personality of Godhead. Srila Prabhupada comments. Chitta Mashnunya Kridasho Bhava. The softness of the heart. In that stage, one is sometimes found shedding tears or shivering. So, to summarize the definition of Bhava Bhakti, the Lord's internal potency, Samvit and Ladini, descends into the heart of the devotee. Bhava is the onset of prema, and bhava causes the heart to be softened. How to attain bhava bhakti? Prabhupada explains, everyone can attain that bhava stage. There is a process. This process is described by Rupa Goswami, how to come to the bhava stage. Bhava stage means just prior to perfection. One must come to the bhava stage. Next stage is perfection. Next stage is full perfection. So how to come to this bhava stage? That is, Rupa Goswami has described ado shraddha. First of all, a little faith. So Rupa Goswami is explaining that, and Srila Prabhupada comments also on the top of page 132, just in the third paragraph of the purport. Elevation to this stage of ecstasy can be possible in two ways. One way is by constant association with pure devotees. The other way is by special mercy of Krishna. So one can be elevated by special mercy without necessarily having practiced any of the items of Vaidhi sadhana. That's what the example of bhav by kripa means, by mercy. That's the kripa siddha. Examples like, for example, Mahaprabhu, when he was revealing himself to Srivas Thakur and his family, and Mahaprabhu said that if the Nawab comes, then I will go on the boat to Gaur. Mahaprabhu explained that I will induce all of the wild elephants and the wild animals from the jungles, the hogs and the horses and the tigers, and I will induce them to cry in love of Godhead. And Mahaprabhu inquired from Srivas Thakur, do you doubt me, Srivas? And Srivas Thakur was speechless. At that time, Mahaprabhu turned to the niece of Srivas Thakur. Her name was Narayani, who subsequently became the exalted mother of Srila Vrindavan Das Thakur, the author of the authorized biography of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Chaitanya Bhagavat. And Mahaprabhu turned to Narayani. At that time she was 4 years old. And he said, Narayani, chant Hare Krishna and cry. And immediately, hearing this order of Mahaprabhu, just by Rupa Goswami mentions, just by the glance, or just by the desire of the pure devotee, bestowing through the glance, through his kindness, bestowing that full prema on the, in this case, bhava prema on the living entity. And she hadn't performed any sadhana practice. And immediately she was crying with love of Godhead, the bhava, the softness of the heart, the tears, the shivering, calling out the name of Krishna, Narayani, as she lay on the floor. So Srila Prabhupada comments, elevation to that stage by the special mercy of Krishna or his devotee is very rare. The purport is that one should execute devotional service rigidly in the association of devotees so that there will be certainty in raising oneself to the ecstatic position. Just like, for example, we could consider Srila Prabhupada being on the Uttam platform, the highest level of Krishna consciousness, and therefore having the potency to simply bestow this prema, love of Godhead, upon his disciples. However, we don't see this happening. Rather, Srila Prabhupada, by instructing the disciples, by training them in the sadhana practice, in worship of the deity, in the regulative chanting process, in the Sankirtan process, in the hearing and chanting, Prabhupada's not only delivering his disciples, but delivering the humanity for generations to come. So in this way, although Srila Prabhupada had the potency to simply bestow love of Godhead out of mercy upon an unqualified living entity who hadn't practiced sadhana, in general we don't see Srila Prabhupada doing that. And in general, another example Srila Prabhupada gives in this connection is that Rabindranath Tagore, actually his name was Thakur, but he adjusted it for the British tongue, so Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore, he was given a Nobel Prize in Literature. It's an international award. And the Nobel Prize in Literature he was given. And he was also given a honorary PhD, doctorate in literature from Oxford University. So this is possible for anyone. There's possibility that I could also get an honorary degree, an honorary doctorate from Oxford University in literature. That's also possible that I could get that. However, it's very unlikely. It's very unlikely, although it is possible. There is a possibility of that happening, but it's very unlikely. So in the same way, Prabhupada gives the example that we shouldn't just think that like Rabindranath Tagore, I'll get the doctorate just by honorary degree. It is possible, but it's highly unlikely, so therefore in general everyone goes through the training of the college and passes the examination, and in that way, as Prabhupada said, there's certainty of attaining the goal of Bhava Bhakti. So therefore we practice the sadhana. As Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Ananya chetasya satatam yomam smarati nittasaha tasyaham sulabha parta nitta duktasya yogina. Because of their constant engagement, nitta duktasya yogina, in practicing Bhagavad Bhakti, then tasyaham sulabha parta, it's very easy for them to attain me. So by the constant practice of sadhana bhakti, and Bhagavad Bhakti Nijukta, being completely engaged constantly connected to the Lord through the sadhana process, then it's certain that one will achieve the goal of Bhava Bhakti. Rupa Goswami goes on to explain the Astasatvika Bhava, the 8 different symptoms of Bhava Bhakti. And Prabhupada comments, in this connection with some unscrupulous neophytes imitating the above symptoms for cheap adoration, not only Vishwanath Chakravarti but also Srila Rupa Goswami treats them very critically. Sometimes all of the above 8 symptoms of ecstasy are imitated by mundane devotees. So just like we saw Mahaprabhu with the crying and with the shivering and falling unconscious, this Astasatvika Bhav that Mahaprabhu demonstrated when he arrived in Jagannath Puri Mandir and took darshan of Gopal Rai Jagannath Swami, he fell down unconscious. And these symptoms can be imitated. That one can, the crying and the falling unconscious. And in this way, these Astasattviga Bhava that we see in the Lord and in the character of the great exalted Vaishnavas, we don't use to actually identify the Bhava Bhaktas, because these symptoms can be imitated. Rupa Goswami next described the characteristics of a person who has actually developed his ecstatic love for Krishna. And these characteristics are as follows. So therefore Rupa Goswami gives the 9 actual symptoms of a Bhava Bhakta. These are discussed in chapter 18 of Nectar Devotion, the character of one in ecstatic love. And Srila Prabhupada lists these 9 genuine symptoms of a Bhava Bhakta to begin his purport on this chapter. Anyartakaladvam, Prabhupada explains, he is always anxious to utilize his time in the devotional service of the Lord. He does not like to be idle. He wants service always, 24 hours a day, without deviation. Kshanti, he is always reserved and perseverant. Virakti, he is always detached from all material attraction. Mana Shanyata, he does not long for any material respect in return for his activities. Ashabandha, he is always certain that Krishna will bestow his mercy upon him. Shamyutkanta, he is always very eager to serve the Lord faithfully. Nam Gan Shadaruchi, he is very much attached to the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. Ashakti Tadguna Kyanei, he is always eager to describe the transcendental qualities of the Lord. Prititad Bhashati Shtale, he is very pleased to live in a place where the Lord's pastimes are performed. For example, Mathura, Vrindavan or Dwarka. In the subsequent pages of the chapter, Srila Prabhupada explains further detail on the different 9 symptoms of Bhava Bhakti. And in general, Prabhupada emphasizes the rareness of Bhava Bhakti. On page 139, he's explaining, it is said by Rupa Goswami that the attachment exhibited by pure devotees to Krishna cannot be perfected in the hearts of fruitive workers or mental speculators, because such attachment in pure Krishna consciousness is very rare and not possible to achieve even for many liberated persons. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, liberation from material contamination at this stage at which devotional service can be achieved. For a person who simply wants to have liberation and to merge into the impersonal Brahmajyoti, attachment to Krishna is not possible to acquire. This attachment is very confidentially kept by Krishna and is bestowed only upon pure devotees. Even ordinary devotees cannot have such pure attachment for Krishna. When we consider the 9 genuine symptoms of Bhava Bhakti as delineated by Srila Rupa Goswami, we can understand that we are actually quite a distance from the Bhava Bhakti platform, and we're progressing in devotional life. However, we do on occasion sometimes see devotees demonstrating some of the symptoms of Bhava Bhakti, just like, for example, devotees may on occasion shed tears in their practice of devotional service. We may see this on occasion on ceremonies like Vyas Puja, when devotees speak aspects of Vaidhi Sadhana like Guru Pad Asray, their realizations and their shelter at the lotus feet of their respective gurus, and they oftentimes are overwhelmed. So that's experiencing these feelings. That type of experience is not mundane tears. These types of tears are obviously not mundane if one is feeling the emotional sentiment in remembering a departed Vaishnava or the relationship one has with one's spiritual master. These are spiritual relationships, and if they induce tears, then those types of that experience is a spiritual emotion. And we can perhaps consider that those types of experiences fall into the category that Srila Rupa Goswami now describes And Srila Prabhupada explains on the next page of his purport, it's described as imitative attachment or rati abhas. And Srila Prabhupada explains, sometimes it is found that a person actually attached to material enjoyment or salvation, that means that they're not actually qualified to be on the level of bhava because they still have some material contamination there. They may have a desire for material enjoyment or they may have desire for liberation. However, he has the good fortune to associate with pure devotees while they are engaged in chanting the holy name of the Lord. At that time, simply by the association of such pure devotees, the moon-like rays from their hearts reflect on him, and by the influence of the pure devotees, he may show some likeness of attachment. So particularly, Prabhupada's analogy here is so beautiful. The moon-like rays from their hearts may reflect on him. So similarly, in such programs like we were sharing, where the great assembly of Vaishnavas, the Vaishnava Shommelon, and if we're discussing the relationships with of shelter at the lotus feet of one's spiritual preceptors, or we're discussing our remembrance of great Vaishnava acharyas who we associated with and have subsequently entered the Prakat Lila and no longer present on the planet, and we may be generating the sentiments, and the sentiments are already there. The Prabhupada says the moon-like rays from the heart of the divine souls who are all there to worship and to take the association of that great Vaishnava. So in such assemblies of pure Vaishnavas, then these symptoms may manifest. By the association of pure devotees, attachment for Krishna can be aroused. But if one commits an offense at the lotus feet of a devotee, one's shadow attachment or para attachment can be extinguished. Rupa Goswami now goes on to discuss prema bhakti, and Srila Prabhupada examines this in chapter 19 of the Nectar Devotion, Devotional Service in Pure Love of God. Srila Prabhupada writes, when one's desire to love Krishna in one's particular relationship becomes intensified, this is known as pure love of Godhead. Let's read the Sanskrit verse that Srila Prabhupada translates here, which was composed by Srila Rupa Goswami, describing prema bhakti, pure love of Godhead. Samyan ma shrita svanto mama svati shayan kitaha bhava sha'eva chandradama buddhai prema nigatyate. When that bhava softens, the heart completely becomes endowed with a great feeling of possessiveness in relation to the Lord and becomes very much condensed and intensified. It is called prema, love of Godhead, by learned scholars. Srila Prabhupada's commenting, he will not expose himself, but if you attain the stage of prema, then you will see him. How you will see? Sadaiva, always. Not that for 2 minutes I see Krishna and is no more there. No, not like that. Premanjana charita bhakti valochanena shanta shadaiva. Shadaiva means constant, incessant. If you attain the stage of prema, then you will see him. Prabhupada's explaining. That's prema bhakti. This pure love can be transferred to the Supreme Personality of Godhead under 2 conditions. Out of ecstasy and out of causeless mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. So similarly, as we were discussing, that one can, by practicing sadhana, awaken bhava, and then that is the onset of prema. Or alternatively, one can simply be awarded prema directly by a prema bhakta, or directly by a prema bhakta, or directly by the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Rupa Goswami goes on to describe the 2 types of prema. So one who awakens prema or achieves prema by practicing Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, awakening bhava, achieves prema, that is the Vaikuntha prema, or Mahatma Gyan prema, that is love of Godhead like the residents of Vaikuntha, who have realization that Vaikuntanath is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they have love for Him, complete love for Him. That was awakened by practice of sadhana, awakening bhava and prema, and they achieve a Vaikuntha lok, a Vaikuntha mukti, Vaikuntha siddhi, and there in a form like that of the Lord, a four-armed form, they worship Sri Hari. That's called Mahatma Gyan Prema, understanding that Sri Hari is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and they are His servants. Now, if one practices Raganuga sadhana, here we can see particularly the importance of cultivating Raganuga sadhana, and how Srila Rupa Goswami very mercifully has included this as a standard process for those following the guidelines that he has given us. That by practicing Raganuga sadhana and developing bhava, Raganuga sadhana means cultivating the sentiment of the higher rasas, as we see in Vrindavan Dham, the Shakya Rash, Vatsalya Rash, Madhurya Rash, by practicing sadhana, following in the footsteps of the Ragatmaka Bhaktas who are expert, who are the personifications of these various mellows, and following in their footsteps, and developing bhava, and then prema, braja prema. And that type of prema Rupa Goswami describes as Kevala prema. Mahaprabhu also in his teachings to Rupa Goswami, he uses the term Kevala prema. And the difference being that in Kevala prema, there is no conception of the Aishwarya Gyan that is there in the Vaikuntha prema. In the Vaikuntha prema, the prema bhaktas who have prema, they love Sri Hari and they understand that he is the Supreme Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But in Vrindavan, where the sentiments of paternity and Sakya, friendship, and Madhurya ras prevail, there is no sentiment of the opulence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In fact, Aishwarya Deklayo, Mahaprabhu is explaining to Rupa Goswami that Aishwarya Deklayo, even on occasion where Nanda Dulal, he manifests his opulence as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Aishwarya Deklayo, Nija Shambandha Shemane. The Brajabasis are never disturbed in their intimate relationship. The example that Sriman Mahaprabhu gives to Srila Rupa Goswami in this connection was Jasoda Ma, when Sri Krishna and Baladev returned from the pasturing grounds, and at that time the cowherd boys mentioned to Ma Jasoda that this morning Krishna ate clay. And Yasoda was very concerned. And when she questioned Krishna, he denied that and said, no, this is just some story. Balaram and the other cowherd boys, they're conspiring against me today, and they're making up these stories. It's not true. So Mother Yasoda, she called Bal Gopal. She said, let me see. Come, sit on my lap. And she looked into the mouth of Gopal, and she saw the Virat Rup, the Vishwa Rup, the universal form, and all of the planetary systems and all of the elements, the Pradhan, and she even saw Bharat, Vrindavan, and herself sitting there with Krishna on her lap. So momentarily after that darshan of the Vishwarup darshan, momentarily Ma Jasoda at that time began philosophical consideration. And she thought, why am I wasting my life in household life? But this is very momentary. And then again she said, this is your child, you have to look after him, feed him. And it is Nija Sambandha Shemani. So even Krishna displays pastimes which would induce the Brajabasis to recognize him as the Supreme Godhead. Even though there may be some flickering sentiment of that, Nija Sambandha, it doesn't overwhelm their Nija Sambandha, their personal, intimate relationship with Krishna in Vrindavan. So this is Kevala Prem. And of course, as Chakravarti Thakur explains, that the Ramna Kachit Upasana, Ramna Kachit Upasana, what is the most pleasing? Ramna Kachit Upasana, of worship of the Supreme Lord, that Aradha Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayasta Dhamma Vrindavanam, the Aradha Bhagavan, the most worshipable form of the Supreme Lord. Chakravarti Thakur explains, Aradha Bhagavan, Dharma Aradha Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayo, Brajesha, the king of Braj, Tanayo, his darling son, Tat Dhamma Vrindavanam, and his dham is, his residence is Vrindavan. Ramna Kachit Upasana, what is the most pleasing? Kachit, what is the most pleasing? Upasana, type of worship. Ramna, what is the most pleasing? Brajavadu Bhaganija Kalpita, that which is performed by the residents of Vrindavan. Because that type of service where Nanda Dulal is worshipped just as the cowherd boy, and as the Bankshidari, the flute player, and as the dancer Gopijana Ballabh, and not as the Supreme Lord. That is the most pleasing type of association and service to the Lord, and most intimate. Iti drik salilabi ananda kundai shvagosham nimajantam akkapayantam. Satyabrata Muni writes that iti drik salilabi, seeing these leelas where Ma Yasoda is chasing Gopal with a stick to chastise him, and rudantam muhu netra yugmam rijantam, he's rubbing his eyes, and the mascara is running down his eyes with his two little fists as he's rubbing his eyes. Muhu shashakampa chirikantaka, and his neck is quivering out of fear. Jashoda biyodukala davamanam, Jashoda bhiya, out of fear of Mother Yasoda. He's actually afraid, and Mother Yasoda is angry and chasing after him. Iti drik shalilabi ananda kunde, when the residents, when the Swagosham, when the Brajabasis see these pastimes, iti driksa lila ananda kunde, it merges them into the pools of bliss. Ananda kunde, iti driksa lila ananda kunde, Swagosham nimajantam akyapaya, nimajan, they merge into oceans of bliss. So this is the topmost relishable experience of love of Godhead, where there's no obligation. We're serving you because you're God, and we offer up. No, we're enjoying with you, and you're the most enchanting, the most wonderful, the most attractive village boy in Vrindavan. And this is Braja Prem. This is Kevala Prem, as Rupa Goswami is describing as being the ultimate state of love of Godhead, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is bestowing upon humanity, Krishna Prema Pradayate, through the Sankirtan movement. And Rupa Goswami is his principal curriculum writer and trainee supervisor, and he's giving us this analysis of the different states of love of Godhead, and how the Vrindavan Prema, the Braja Prem that Mahaprabhu is come to give, is the ultimate, topmost experience of love of Godhead. Towards the end of the chapter 19, just before we conclude our study of the Purva Vibhag of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Srila Prabhupada is paraphrasing Rupa Goswami's concluding analysis of the stages from Shraddha to Prema. Srila Prabhupada comments, although many different processes for developing love of God have been explained so far, Srila Rupa Goswami now gives us a general description of how one can best achieve such a high position. The beginning of ecstatic love of Godhead is basically faith. And Srila Prabhupada, he paraphrases the different items from Shraddha, Sadhushanga, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nibriti, Nishta, Ruchi, Ashakti Bhava, and Prema. When he is freed from unwanted occupations, that's number 4 here, just the last few lines summarized quickly. When he is freed from unwanted occupations, Anartha Nivriti, his faith becomes steadily fixed, that's Nishta. He develops transcendental taste for devotional service, Ruchi. Then attachment, Ashakti. Then ecstasies, Bhava. And in the last stage, pure love of Godhead, Prema. These are the different stages of development of pure love. Srila Prabhupada comments, only the most fortunate persons can achieve such success in life. Lord Shiva therefore tells Parvati, my dear Supreme Goddess, you may know from me that any person who has developed the ecstasy of love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is always merged in transcendental bliss on account of this love cannot even perceive the material distress or happiness coming from the body or the mind. So in this way we've concluded our study of the Purva Vibhag, of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu and the first 19 chapters of the Nectar of Devotion. Let's conclude our study with this comment from Srila Prabhupada. The Nectar of Devotion will teach us how to turn on the one switch that will immediately brighten everything everywhere. One who does not know this method is missing the point of life. Srila Prabhupada ki